Well, I'm sure you have all noticed that I am not one of your typical moderators. Brie and Tasha will return to you shortly. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Madeline Clark, and I am the latest and last Senior Policy Officer here at Equality Rights Alliance, which is very strange to say out loud. Oh, you can't hear? How's that? Okay, thank you, ladies. One of the great joys of being a part of Equality Rights Alliance is getting to have conversations like these and meet so many people who are so committed to working towards gender equality. And I cannot think of any group of contributors who exemplify that more than our Young Women's Advisory Group, or YWAG. For those of you who are not familiar with YWAG, in addition to advising us and being one of the only voices for young women in the National Women's Alliance's structure, they also do a lot of really cool projects, including recently their Let's Talk report, which looked at sexual education for young women and non-binary people in Australia. And we have 3 of them here today to talk about intergenerational advocacy. So what an incredible lineup after that last panel. It worked out beautifully for us. Firstly, we have Brie Delahunty, who you'll already know from being one of your moderators earlier. Brie is the Manager of Policy and Research at Chief Executive Women, who are one of our member organisations, in addition to her previous involvement in several other feminist organisations and initiatives, including YWAG. Natasha Ritchie is the CEO of Accountable Futures Collective, as well as the chairperson of Youth Affairs Council of Victoria, and many other impressive titles, which you can see in her bio in your programs. Finally, we have Claire Bertholli, who will be joining us online today. Claire is a youth and disability activist who joins us from our sister alliance, Women with Disabilities Australia. And she's also been involved with a number of notable organisations that you can see in her bio. All 3 of them have been invaluable members of YWAG, and I am so delighted to welcome them back onto the stage and the screen to talk about the role of intergenerational advocacy.
Hi again, everyone. I know you've heard a lot from me today, so I do deeply appreciate your attention and patience. One of the joys of my day job is that I often get to work with some very cool older women. And one day last year, I was working on a project with a lady who I admire very much. The project focused around equipping workplaces to support victims of sexual harassment in the workplace. We were talking about some small detail or another where she suddenly slammed her glasses down, looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I really thought that my generation would have fixed this for you. I mean, how are we still talking about this shit?" And she's right, because sometimes it can feel like the more things change, the more things stay the same. Social justice doesn't function like linear time, and we can't trust that we're automatically moving forward into a better future. Yes, we have often had incredible success as a movement, but when taken at a macro level, generations of feminists and activists have been chipping away at the same issues. A couple off the top of my head include reproductive rights being constantly undermined and under assault for decades, intimate partner violence deaths have increased by 30% in the last 12 months alone, and we still lag behind in political participation in every country in the world. Women are globally poorer than men and still systemically underpaid and undervalued in the workplace. There is continued and devastating neo-colonial conflict and violence across the world, and the denial of sovereignty of innocent people in many places in the world, including Australia. Women are excluded from many studies and medical trials due to hormone fluctuation. And it really will be news to those researchers when they find out that women and non-binary folks are running loose in the world with their fluctuating hormones. Even in art, women have historically been muses and the subject, but when it comes to claiming agency as an artist, they're often completely marginalised or ridiculed for trying. And these same issues could be kind of located in any decade, and we have been fighting them for centuries and at every stage of our lives. And sometimes it can really feel like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill, except there's someone saying, "That boulder's not that heavy, have you tried not being hysterical about it?" And while some of the material conditions of these issues have changed, the underlying cause is really still the same. And it can be really easy to split issues down any kind of demographic line. And don't get me wrong, there are specific issues that do affect specific age groups very differently. But to isolate these issues, and in a sense, ourselves from the group, we lessen our power. There are issues that do deeply impact one generation more than the other. the climate crisis is a looming existential and arguably apocalyptic disaster, and it will disproportionately impact younger women globally. The proliferation of violent masculinity and alt-right rhetoric across the internet has poisoned the only third space we have left. These masculinity influences are spearheading a violent pushback against gender equality and feminism, and championing the kind of rigid gender norms that really would have seemed a bit much in the 1950s. And in the face of these incredible challenges, it can feel a bit too easy to slip into pessimism about the future, or to think about the world through the lens of the news cycle, or even just the next election cycle. Toni Morrison warned us that the course of time seems to be narrowing to a vanishing point beyond which humanity neither exists nor wants to. It is singular, this diminished, already withered desire for the future. Seen through the selectively shifting gradients of past time, the future thins out, it's dumbed down, limited to a 30-year treasury bond or a 4-year election cycle. So this forces us to turn inward, clutching at the primer book dream of the family, strong, ideal and protective, or the traditional norms that do seem to suffocate everything we do. On an individual level, yes, we are statistically living longer, we're becoming better educated, we are becoming healthier. But it doesn't mean that we're moving forward with social justice and equality. But again, Toni Morrison forces us to ask, when we think about these longer, healthier lives, what are we doing with them? How successful were we in convincing our children that it doesn't matter that their comfort was wrested and withheld from other children? How adept we were in getting the elderly to agree to indignity and poverty as a reward for their citizenship? How can we accept that our elders, our ancestors, are living in poverty or suffering of this indignity? How can we stand by when our mother's work is systemically ridiculed and undervalued? How can we tolerate the increased violence or leave an uninhibitable environment to our children? It goes without saying that our feminism has to be intersectional to have any kind of impact, but it does also need to be intergenerational. We talk about the power of organising and movement building across generations, about the great potential for transfer of knowledge and experience through intergenerational dialogue and documentation of our movements. But just as often, we have conversations about exclusion and erasure. Young feminists voice feelings that their predecessors are often not willing to make space for them and acknowledge their presence within movements. And older feminists concurrently express feelings that their efforts are underappreciated and their historical contributions are being marginalised by younger feminists. And to be totally blunt, we really don't have the time for this kind of erasure. We do have a lot to do. And like the river carving through rock, patriarchal thinking and structures have shaped and limited our lives for millennia. And only holistic, concerted change will ever make a dent in these structures. And every single success of the feminist movement has been a team effort. Fake ethics professor Chidi Anagonye from the excellent show The Good Place discusses the existential question, what do we owe each other? And while I'm not nearly smart enough to begin to answer that, when thinking about what we do owe each other, I do turn to very real political philosopher Antonio Gramsci, who spoke about the optimism of the will. The belief that the human capacity to meet new challenges, overcome them, and move society forward. A confidence that we can make our own history, even if not in circumstances of our own choosing. Intergenerational feminism, where we collectively respect and acknowledge that we owe each other community and love, is life-giving. Intergenerational feminism is uplifting and nourishing, and at its best, it's about mutual acknowledgement, respect, appreciation, and growth. Some of the most energising and healing moments of my life have been through feminism. The community created with women old enough to be my mum, who I think about as big sisters, or with girls almost young enough to be my daughters, who I think of as my little sisters. These women, many of them in this room, have called me into powerful spaces as their friend. They hoist me up, allowing me to see through the angst of stress of many tomorrows and what is to come, and I owe it to them to do the same. If patriarchal structures are like rivers, we have to be like the ocean, with shifting tides of our different goals and perspectives, but together having the overwhelming power for change. Rebuilding these systems with love, community, and solidarity at the centre. We owe it to each other to work together to make these big changes, so the ones coming up behind us just don't have to deal with this shit.
So if you're comfortable, I'd like to ask you all to close down your eyes or soften your gaze down below. And as you sit here and hopefully don't fall asleep, I ask you to picture your mother or a maternal figure in your life. Now, if you can, imagine her as a little girl. What is she doing? What does she look like? Next, I ask you to picture a young girl in your life now, someone you know or have seen around. What is she doing? How does she play? Now, if you can, picture that little girl growing up and becoming a mother herself to a baby girl. And as you gently open your eyes, the question I hope to ask you all is, what accountability do we have to that little girl, just born into a world that we might understand but has changed? And what about our accountability to her daughter, likely born into and growing up in a world that we in this room can't even imagine yet? Layla Efsad acknowledged that the primary force that drives her work is a passionate desire to become a good ancestor. This sentiment is what First Nations culture innately knows. It's what my aunties taught me. And this is the sentiment of becoming a good ancestor, with which I and others imagine what accountability to young people now and young people of the future could mean. Now, if you'll roll with me, I'd like to ask you to raise your hand if you resonate with the notion that we all have a duty to become good ancestors to those who come after us. And keep your hand raised. So I'd ask you to lower your hand now, or keep it raised. Keep your hand raised if you also believe that we have a duty to young people who are young now, or you can lower it if you don't. And keep your hand raised if your organisation or collective has more than 5 women under the age of 25 who are involved, who you are in relationship with. Keep your hand raised if at least one young woman under the age of 25 in your organisation or collective has a senior leadership role or who is on the board. And finally, keep your hand up if you actively currently engage with the intersectional, radical, and transformational dialogue on TikTok, a new site of power where so many young people are coming to and contributing to feminist education and new knowledges, and we don't have that many hands left. While many of us experience personal, relational accountability to the young people in our lives, or resonate with the idea of becoming a good ancestor, or seek to create a community of care that Bree and others have so beautifully spoken about, structurally, our organisations, movements, and institutions aren't set up to meaningfully engage with young people, and certainly not to create genuine accountability to future generations, to protect them from the harms. Just this week, the federal government rejected the notion that there is a duty of care to future generations to protect them from the harms of climate change. The strategy that we're here discussing today, Working for Women, only mentions young people a grand total of 4 times. It mentions youth a total of 0 times. Yet neurobiologically, young people are uniquely well placed to imagine the ideas and the systems that we need during epochal change. Young people can readily access unconstrained thinking and also comprehend existing systems. Adolescent brains can harness the visioning of children as they learn the wisdom of elders, alongside having a healthy rejection of existing power. Young people's brains are wired to create new combinations, ideas, and paradigms. As a young woman, I've been told I can have a say on particular topics at particular times by particular organisations. I've been involved in voice participation or even co-design processes with young people that are extractive, surface level, or tokenistic. I and others have been treated as window dressing or as ring-ins when late in the process someone realises that no young people are in the room. Surely we can collectively raise our aspiration. It's what we owe each other. We can raise our aspiration to embed genuine accountability. The mechanisms, the tools, the practices to embed accountability to young people do exist or are being created. We can help. We can shift the way our organisations, policy processes, collective advocacy and institutions face, away from how it's always been done, and towards ourselves being the way we wish the system was. I and others are working to bring this notion of accountability to young people to life because we believe that we would all be in a different position today if the leaders and decision makers of the past were accountable as they were to their funders, to government, to law, to their strategic plans, but we're also accountable to young people shaping their organisations, and we're also accountable to future generations in tangible, meaningful ways that codified their accountability to future generations and to young people with as much rigour as they attended to their shareholders. There is an accountability void in our society and in our feminist movement. What we promise young people or what we're striving to achieve for them is so different to their lived reality. We have the opportunity to work together across generations as genuinely equal learning partners who bring different experiences. And Claire is going to, in a moment, speak to how we think this might be possible as YWAG and ERA step into a new era. We, as young feminists, seek to honour the work that others have done, the shoulders we stand on, the paths that they and you have carved for us. And we're asking now that the adults in this room and other rooms raise your aspiration beyond just hearing young people's voices or building our capability, towards building your own capability to shift power, towards building your own capability to become accountable to the young people in your lives and to future generations. Who are we doing this for? What ancestors do we want to be? Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire, my friend is she, her, and I'm joining you from Orbicorn today, which is in Newcastle in New South Wales, and thank you for giving me this time to speak about YWAG and what we're thinking of creating. So our purpose, as you've just heard from Bri and Tash and their rousing speeches, which I'm bored by, is that we want to create an intergenerational energizing solidarity space where advocacy is engaged with good fun and good place to shift the conditions for young women and gender diverse folks in Australia. So we're doing this because we've identified a gap, that there's no organisation in Australia doing this citizen and feminist spaces for young people under 30, at a national level. And we think it's an incredible opportunity we've got to kind of take people on the journey with us and start shaping a space that's not only for us as feminists, who have benefited from learning from others in this space, including all yourselves on this call in the room. But I also think it's important that we shape spaces for people who are just coming through and people who are tough, that don't even exist yet, and want to find that place so that they can unpack their world and advocate for themselves in a better supportive, fun space. So we want to create a YWAG that is leading through intergenerational and intersectional thought and leadership towards accountability, so that we're accountable for the actions that we make, that our support in the space are accountable to us in helping us to get where we need to go. But also, I really think that the benefit of YWAG for me is that I can show up as myself. Like, I'm showing up today and I'm in my office and I've just been able to do what I want, but then I've been able to show up as me and come here and talk to you today. I think the strength of the Young Women's Advisory Group so far is that we can create a space where we can talk about feminist issues and the legal system and the things that impact us on a systemic level, but at the same time we can also have a chat about who's in the VIP section for Taylor Swift concert at the Eras Tour in London. this is actually what has been spoken about in the ERA group chat. We conflict between writing a speech and writing a grant proposal to talking about feminism. We want our feminist movement to be we want our feminist movement to be inclusive and supportive of the young people coming through in whatever capacities they can show up at. So I want to invite you all to scan this little QR code, if I can get it to open. This will be up for the next little while. It will also be shared around the room.
Oh no, did Claire freeze? Helen didn't freeze.
You're supportive and interested in the ideas we bring forward today. Whether it be you want to co-run an event with us, or you just want to find out more about how we want to set up our lab, or even something if you think there is some areas of funding we can do, that would also be great. So yeah, just send the QR, answer some of the questions, and yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Lol, the QR code doesn't work, which is entirely not Claire's fault, entirely mine. So what I will do is quickly do a tech edit, and we'll put it back up maybe after the break, if that's okay. We were trying to bring the QR code back, and it didn't quite work, so I'll give it another go.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes.
So for the people who are online, feminist TikTok, where, how, what?
You have to skip past the Nazi videos and the cooking videos, and you get there eventually. You just got to keep going.
Sorry. Oh, yes. Hi.
Virginia? Oh, sorry. No, sorry. You go. No.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really very, very enlightening. I was frantically taking notes. What I've noticed today is we're all actually, I think everybody in this room acknowledges that we need feminism that's intersectional. What I'm still a little bit confused about is what that actually looks like in practice. I think, and I've asked this question in a lot of forums, and I have not actually gotten a straightforward answer. I think what we're doing in Australia is acknowledging intersectionality. But I don't know that we know how to do it in practice. I got even more confused when you were talking about intersectionality from an intergenerational point of view. I don't know that you have the answer, but I'm wondering what you think that might look like in practice. Because I'm sort of thinking, because what I started to write down, I was like, okay, what would this look like for my daughter and my colleagues who are not women of color, who are not gay, who are not transgender, and my daughter may or may not be all four things in one. Because I think when we're talking about intersectionality, a lot of the times we're looking at the intersections of kind of two big structures like racism and sexism. But what if it's racism, sexism, xenophobia, blah, blah, there's a lot of things, right? What does that look like in practice? And that's probably goes to everybody here as well, if you've got an answer for me, as in what does this actually look like, feminism from an intersectional point of view? I'm going to pick this apart tomorrow, by the way, in my session too.
Amazing, and it's a banger question. I mean, I can take a guess. I think for me at the moment, something I'm really interested in exploring is what is the healing that we need to do separately and then what is the healing that we need to do together. And if I think about building solidarity, and when we think about a reimagined YWAG, which a QR code is going to tell you all about, I think it's probably building solidarity in 3 ways. So one is around the individual to collective. How are there spaces to make sense of the world as individuals? And that might be from the lens of a particular identity. It might be coming together and finding community, people who experience the same way that we do, and being able to say, like, you know what, that was really shit. Like, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Or like, it wasn't you. Or you've done the best you could do in that situation. Or like, hell yeah, you're doing amazingly. Have you also considered this? And so I think it's about like the individual to collective as one form of solidarity. Another form for me, and I guess when it comes to accountability to young people, is solidarity across generations. So how, instead of being separated by age and by demographic, are we coming together to focus on what it is that we care about and then, genuinely learn from each other? And that requires all of us to see each other as learning partners. Young people in particular are often seen as beneficiaries of a program rather than true partners in change. And I think that requires young people to lift and to have their capability lifted and supported, but it also requires adults to build new capability and ways of like stepping back or shutting up or sharing power. So I think that's the second. First was like individual to collective solidarity. The next is across generations. And then the third for me is around being separated by struggle to building solidarity across those struggles. So how in the feminist space are we raising consciousness about the different movements that are happening right now that need us and how they'd like us to show up? And how we should show up or how we shouldn't, or where we're invited and where we're not. And if I think about YWAG, it's been a place for me to come and do all 3. So 1, like to understand that there's others who experience the same things that I do. 2, to like be able to learn from feminists who've come before me. And then 3, to understand that there's things that I'm just not even conscious of that I need to step into an awareness of so that I can be a better intersectional feminist. So for me, it's, how do we create the spaces for those 3 things?
Oh no, I just wanted to add on, it's also a great opportunity in like those solidarity spaces to realise when it is important to lend your voice and like how you want to show up. It's also very important to know when it's none of your business. And so I think that's also been like a deeply important learning for in YWAG. I think there's one more person.
Hi, my name's Jill. I'm from Children by Choice. I'm very mindful that we can all hear the clinking in the back, which is like, make your question quick, Jill. I'm really fortunate that I also volunteer on a community board for young women survivors of sexual assault. And one of the things that we've been grappling with is that wanting to bring in, there was an invitation to a young person who had lived experience onto the board. And absolutely connecting into that group of, under 25s and really trying to lean into that. I've been really fortunate to work really closely with her and do what I can in terms of mentoring. We had some really key conversations probably in the last 6 months, and she's been on the board for a couple of years now. She said, Jill, I come onto this board and it's my sensation that I do this out of honour, but I don't think I'd ever recommend it to any other young woman. The reason for that is I feel like I'm in a room of people that are either working or engaged or professionals or accountants in this sector, and I feel really intimidated to speak up, and I feel like I'm not able to add value. And in reflecting really deeply about that, and I've had encouraged great conversations within our board around that process and coached that kind of space where we could get into development. I wonder how that resonates or what reflections you might have, because I really did hear powerfully and am deeply concerned about the tokenism as opposed to what is the perhaps misaligned intention of inviting someone into a space that actually feels degrading and powerless without the right attention to capacity building and resourcing. Big question, hopefully a little question.
Governance, woo. Thank you for your question, and also thank you for creating that invitation to a young person. Like maybe it wasn't the right experience for them, or maybe you've learned things or maybe they've learned things too. But I think being able to test or try something different is so powerful. I think a lot about young people and governance, because that's just kind of the person I am. But I think, for me, one of the things I have learnt is how to right-size the opportunity for the right person, but also to think about what the responsibility is that we're placing on one person. It's really hard to be changing systems as you're also trying to navigate them. I think a lot about one person is a trailblazer, 2 people are a minority, and 3 people can be a community. There's 3 of us today because we can bolster each other in different ways. So I think there's real strength in numbers. But as it comes to governance in particular, I would really challenge folks to support young people onto the board, but in ways that might not be traditional. So the organisation I work for, we're testing an intergenerational governance model that looks like a Venn diagram, where we have a fiduciary board that is made up of adults, 18 plus, who look after finance, governance, compliance, all the things that a typical fiduciary board would look after, and they have delegated the responsibility to develop and approve strategy to a group of 10 young people. Young people who are very, very interested in the movement that the organisation is building, who are very interested in the strategy part of things, but who did not want to be spending time sifting through spreadsheets they don't understand, or they weren't 18 yet, but still wanted to be in decision-making rooms. So how do we actually challenge the structures that we kind of all take for granted, this is the way it's done, to think about carving out spaces that young people respond to? Also, I guess as part of that Venn diagram, there's a place in the middle in our organisation where we have an intergenerational board who actually spend the time with the Impact Young People board and then the Fiduciary Adult board to think about how they can be working together well. Sure, it's meant that we've had to think a lot about, delegation of responsibility and how the Constitution reflects that and what does conflict resolution look like when those boards don't get along. But I think it is about time that we challenge the existing structures that men put in place to think about how young people and women can step into the spaces they want to step into and be supported when they're in those spaces in ways that they can design. So I guess my answer to you would just be really challenge everything you know. Thank you so much.
Can we have another round of applause for our incredible 3 YWAG women, please?